Welcome to Desert Star Chats, the show where we explore topics in mental health, substance use, and recovery from the heart of the Arizona desert. I'm your host, Nicole Velasco, and in each episode, we embark on a journey through difficult, confusing, or misunderstood topics in the mental health and recovery field. So please join me as I chat with professionals and we dive into complex subjects, ask the difficult questions, and make these topics accessible to everyone. If you are someone seeking insight into mental health, substance use treatment, or hoping to support a friend or family member, Desert Star Chats is your go-to resource. So get ready for insightful, delightful discussions. This is Desert Star Chats. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Desert Star Chats. Today, we are joined by Susie, who is a clinician at Desert Star. Susie, you work in both our substance use program and our gender-specific mental health programs and relationship programs. And so I wanted to sit down and have a deeper conversation, do a deep dive into relationships and how those affect our lives and our mental health. So how are you doing today, Susie?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Wonderful. It's great to have you.
It's good to be here.
So, what is the role of relationships in our lives?
Well, I think as human beings, we're not meant to be alone. And we have relationships with other people for a variety of reasons. Um, it, we need to cooperate with other people in order to be as productive and prosperous as we possibly can. We need relationships of some sort or another in order to be able to have families and raise families.
Yeah.
Um, and relationships in general enrich our lives and make them feel like they're worth living. If we're in healthy relationships with other people, we also have a stronger sense of safety and take care of each other and protect each other.
Yeah. They always talk about how groups formed back in, caveman days and how that tribe was your
Uh-huh.
safety net and that was your how you literally survived. So, those relationships are not just beneficial, they're necessary for
Right,
us to survive as a species, which
right.
is pretty darn important.
Yeah.
How would you define a healthy relationship?
Well, I think there are some central things. Overall, healthy relationship is simply a relationship that's in which the people that are participating are getting their needs met and not being obstacleized in their ability to take care of themselves. So it's different for different people. I, nobody really knows what's exactly it should look like. There's some things that shouldn't be happening in relationships.
Okay.
But healthy relationships are respectful and honest.
Okay.
And yeah, I would say that's the baseline.
Yeah. So you're saying that it can kind of look differently for each relationship that you have?
Right. Well, we have relationships in different settings, and we also have primary relationships, but the people that are involved in them are different people. And so their needs aren't exactly the same. But we all need to be treated with respect, and we all need to I'd say it's fair to say that all of us need respectful treatment, and all of us expect honesty as part of that. We need to be able to trust anyone with whom we're involved.
Yeah. Yeah, again, coming back to that sense of safety, because if you don't feel like you can trust them, you can't
Right.
relax, you can't have that sense of safety. And so you were saying that there are some things that should not be happening in a relationship. What are some of those kind of red flags or things that somebody should pay attention to?
One of the things we talk about a lot in the therapy groups and in the Desert Star uh, different programs is we talk about boundaries. And boundaries are a way of thinking and a way of behaving in which we respect our own rights and our own preferences and our own needs. And at the same time, we also respect the rights and the needs of other people. and work out that balance. We own our own problems. We don't own somebody else's problems. We take responsibility for what we can control. We don't take responsibility for things we can't control. There's a lot of skill and a lot of thought that goes into having healthy boundaries. And I think that that's an essential component. If that's not in place within a relationship, you're going to have a lot of conflict.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I think some people feel like setting a boundary is mean or
Mhm.
rude, um, that it might push somebody away. But, you know, a healthy use of a boundary can actually help to include people in your lives,
Exactly.
because it protects your space and your energy and,
Yeah.
you know, your own core foundation. Can you give us an example of what a boundary looks like or sounds
Sure.
like?
So when I am thinking about my own boundaries, I don't think about setting a boundary with someone else. I set a boundary for myself. I think about what I need and what's important to me. And then I have a responsibility to communicate that to other people with whom I interact. So I wouldn't I wouldn't say, let's say somebody asked me well, let's see. I'm driving on the I'm riding in a car and we're driving down the highway. And I'm with somebody who's driving really fast and I'm feeling scared.
Okay.
Now, an unhealthy way to set a boundary would be me insisting that they slow down, giving them an ultimatum, telling them I'll never talk to them again if they don't slow down, and saying, this is, I'm just setting a boundary with you.
Yeah, slow
Well,
down or else.
yeah, that's not actually setting a boundary, that's being controlling.
Okay.
However, if I'm driving down the highway or I'm riding down the highway with somebody driving and they're fast and going around curves really fast and I'm scared and I say to them, I'm feeling frightened and it would help me a lot if you would slow down. Now I'm making a request that is based on my need to feel safe. If the person says, well, I'm a really good driver, then my response would be, yes, I know you're a good driver. I'm a timid passenger. So I stay focused on what I need
Yeah.
and on my request. And then if they slowed down, wonderful. If they didn't slow down, I would need to think about, okay, what's my rule for myself? Well, my rule for myself is that I don't ride in the car with people when I don't feel safe. And I don't get in the car with them because I don't want them to, I don't ride with them anyway because I don't want them to be mad. I just figure out a way to keep the relationship and not ride in the car with them anymore.
Right.
It might be taking my car, it might be taking separate cars. It might be, but it won't be me getting in the car with them if they're going to drive faster than I'm comfortable. Notice I didn't say they're going to drive too fast because that would
Right.
be a judgment on them. Instead, I
Yeah.
say I'm not comfortable. And so I need to have a rule for myself to take care of myself.
Yeah. That's an excellent example. I think a lot of times people get stuck in work settings too. Like, for example, if your boss continually asks you to do stuff after hours or sends you emails on the weekends and expects you to respond, what's kind of a boundary you could set with your boss that would help to maintain your own self-care and weekend and boundaries?
Well, I need to start with pardon me. I need to start with what do I need in order to take care of myself. And then I would communicate to my boss about when I can be available and when I am otherwise occupied. And the thing is about boundaries is we all have a right to ask for anything we want as long as we're willing to be told no.
Wow.
My boss has the right to ask me to do some kind of an online seminar at midnight on Christmas Eve. He has the right to ask.
Yeah.
and I have the right to say no.
Yeah.
And if you have that understanding, you can ask me anything as long as you're willing to be told no. And I prefer to associate with people who can honor that kind of understanding. I only say no if it's really important to me. And if I am told no, I need to be good about that and accept that. I need to also understand that sometimes when I say no, the other person has a right to distance themselves.
Mm.
They don't usually, but they
Yeah.
have a right. And if you're not truthful about stuff like that, you end up feeling resentful and it affects you in a lot of ways.
Yes. Yes, it does. And it affects the relationship.
Yeah.
And they might not have any idea why because you said yes.
Yeah, exactly.
They
Good
have
point.
no idea
Good point. Yeah. Yeah.
that you might be feeling that way about a decision that you made.
Right.
Um, so, we've talked a lot about different relationships, with friends, with coworkers, with bosses. Um, I think a lot of people struggle with relationships with themselves.
Yeah.
What does it look like to have a relationship with yourself?
One of my favorite descriptions of self-esteem is not something that you can make higher or goes lower. You either have self-esteem or you don't have self-esteem. And self-esteem is based on a belief that no matter what, no matter my imperfections, I'm important and I matter. Who I am matters and my feelings matter. I matter. With that kind of, Nicole, I lost track of the question.
No worries. So, what does it mean to have a relationship with yourself?
Okay, thank you. So if my self-esteem is based in an acceptance of the thought that I matter, everything else can come from that. If my self-esteem is not in place and I am believing that my value is dependent on what I can produce, how much I have, how I measure up against other people, then my relationship with myself is not going to be healthy.
Yeah.
If I believe no matter what kind of mistakes I make, no matter how how my humanity shows up on a day-to-day basis, I'm still important and I still matter. A lot of creativity and productivity and effectiveness in my life can flow from that, and I'm going to enjoy myself living a whole lot more. So
Yeah.
a good relationship with ourselves is, I might get home late at night and I'm hungry and I'm tired and I feel like just crashing, but I'll have the thought, no, wait a minute, I really matter. I need to take care of myself. I need to feed myself. I need to, take care of myself before I go to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. What's funny, I worked in a daycare center for a couple of years, and in interacting with all of the toddlers, I think they really have that just inherent self-esteem where,
They do, yeah.
yeah, they matter. Their
Uh-huh.
big feelings matter. They need to take care of themselves. They're just going to lay down and take a nap if they're tired. I mean, it's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, how do we lose that?
We get treated like we don't matter by people who are very powerful in our lives. And in order to get along with them, we give up the idea that we're matter. Our self-esteem gets damaged.
Mm,
But we're born knowing that we matter.
yeah,
And that gets taken away from us. And it
yeah.
doesn't necessarily get taken away from us with bad intentions. I mean, some of it is it goes from generation to generation and people think that they're doing what's right. But the way in which children are socialized often leaves them feeling pretty bad about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we're seeing that more and more with the news and the kiddos that are struggling earlier and earlier,
Yeah,
especially in, those social settings in school and stuff.
right.
Um, as an adult, if somebody is listening to this and kind of recognizes, hey, I might be that person. I don't I don't always treat myself like I matter. I don't always, think of myself having the right to say no. Um, h- how can they work towards gaining that self-esteem back?
I think, if somebody is recognizing that, I think it's very good idea to go online or get on the phone and call someone who has a good grounding in counseling and get started in talking about it and get to the bottom of it.
Yes, yes. So how can a therapist help somebody get to the bottom of it? What does that process kind of look like in just a general?
Well, usually when somebody first starts therapy, they have an interview with the therapist and they talk about what's been going on. Therapist listens really carefully and asks them some questions about, um, oh, how things like, are you worrying a lot? Are you sleeping well? How's your appetite? How are you getting along with various people in your life? Do you find yourself thinking the same thoughts over and over again? They ask a lot of questions. And based on that, they start to cooperate with the client in forming an original idea of, what are we going to call this? And how can we get started working on it? And I can tell you that most of the time, a person's relationship with themselves could be in better shape, could be in better shape.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We put a lot of effort into relationships, and I think especially with partners,
Mhm.
and family members. Many times I think that the relationship with ourself gets, um, or maybe it's not, mm, society doesn't put as much importance into that. It's kind of left for last, kind of missed in the overall healthy relationship conversation that happens.
And actually, the best that we have to offer someone is our authentic self. Who we really are, what our talents are, what our strengths are. That's the basis of the connection and the time and the attention and the support that we give and take within a relationship. If I don't know that and don't have that relationship with myself, I don't have that to offer somebody else.
Yes. And, from my experience, being around people that, have some of those symptoms of lower self-esteem, they'll show up differently in different situations. And so if I meet them in two different situations, it seems very fake. I don't know who they are. It's do you know what I mean? It's like a mask
Yeah.
that they've put on, and I don't know how to interact with them. I don't know how they really feel. I can't make that connection with them. And so, I struggle with that. It makes me kind of uncomfortable.
The really sad part about that is that person doesn't really know who they are.
Yeah.
And so they're just trying to be enough and not
Yes.
understanding that they already are enough and they're okay already. They
Yeah.
don't understand that. And I feel sad when I hear people say that, they need to be a better person.
Mm,
And I always want to say, you're good enough already. You just have trouble expressing that in your life.
right. Yeah. Yes, you're already enough. You don't have
You're
to
enough.
do anything to be worthy of love or respect.
There's our
Just,
intrinsic value, and then there's
yes.
how we express it.
Yeah, exactly. Um, let's see. How do family dynamics sort of play into how we create and form relationships?
Well, I love the word familiar, because we learn a bunch of basic assumptions about the way relationships are and the way life is and the way people are. And we learn all of that within our families. Now, if you grow up in a chaotic household with, a lot of disruption, you're not going to necessarily know that that's not necessarily healthy. And if you grow up in a really quiet, distant family that's very structured but not warm or close, that's going to seem familiar and normal. There's a big continuum in how families function. There's a
Yeah,
whole lot of room in the middle. I mean, some families are wild and chaotic and healthy, and some families are cool and collected and still healthy. But
sure.
some families are way out on the edges of the continuum, and if you grow up in a family like that, you're not going to necessarily know how to do it more moderately in your relationships with others.
Yes. And, those assumptions can kind of hold us back sometimes. We might not
Yes.
even know we're making them or having them,
Right,
but we're
right.
we're almost setting that expectation that whoever our partner is or, that new relationship is going to function the same as what we're familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, some people really don't know that you can be with someone else or within a family and there's no abuse going on.
Yeah.
There might be disagreements, there might be conflict, but there's no abuse, there's no disrespect.
Yes. Yes.
And that,
Healthy conflict.
yeah, people who haven't grown up in a healthy environment don't necessarily know that they don't have to live that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Another example I found recently, my husband and I grew up in very different families where at a restaurant, my family only orders water. It does not matter where you go. We are a water only family.
Water.
And yes, water. And his family gets soft drinks at restaurants. And I was baffled, baffled when they went around and there were 6 soft drinks on the table.
It's like, what is this?
Yes, like what?
Yes.
You can't order soft drinks at a restaurant. Like,
That's a really good example of what I'm talking about.
yeah. Yeah. So it was, just small things like that that, you don't inherently know is linked to your family. You just think that's how people do
You just
it.
think everybody does it that way. And
Yeah.
no, not everybody does.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how does kind of working within those expectations, um, help us to grow and I don't know, strengthen the relationship?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, as my husband and I, newly married, getting together, exploring these things about each other, um, it seems like a real opportunity for us to either come together and find that middle ground of what works for us, or for that to be a real great cause of tension
Oh,
between us. Do you know
now I
what I
get it.
mean?
Yeah, now I do.
Um, so,
Yeah.
how do you use those experiences to grow together to be stronger?
I think there are a couple of things. One is that we can cultivate curiosity and appreciation for how our partner is different. And we can really get to know each other deeply, and we can also in that process help each other um, work through some of the stuff in our early life that might not have been perfect.
Yeah.
For example, you might get a couple together and one of them had warm, rich, wonderful experiences over holidays. Like we've just gone through some holidays. And
Hmm.
the other might have had fairly emotionally impoverished holidays
Yes.
and want to avoid them. But between the two of them, they can probably come up with their own set of traditions that are comfortable for both of them and
Yeah.
get to know each other on a deeper level and appreciate each other more in that process. If they get to fighting over who's got the right way and who's got the wrong way, they're going to have problems. But if they have an appreciation for the fact that, wow, this person is different from me and they have a different experience, and I wonder what that's about. And I'd sure like to know more about that. And how do we do this together, and how do we make it our own?
Yeah.
Then it can enrich the relationship.
Yeah, I love the idea of being curious
Yeah.
about the other person's experience and sort of what they're bringing into that setting and that situation. Very cool. Um, do you see a lot of tension coming from cultural differences in relationships?
Well, I think it's really easy to have misunderstandings.
Mm,
And I think that it's very important. I think it's important in all relationships, but in that case, it's really, really important to constantly be checking our assumptions
yeah,
about what's true and what's not true, and what's right and what's wrong, and who's right and who's wrong. I mean, we really have to open up our mind and open up our heart. And we have to not only understand the other person's culture, but we also have to understand what their experience of that culture was.
yeah.
And be careful of staying out of our own cultural assumptions.
Yes, which sounds much easier than it
Very
might be.
difficult. It's very difficult. Yeah, it's so challenging that I think sometimes if people knew how challenging that was going to be, they probably run the other direction. And at the same time, it's a good thing that they don't.
Yeah, exactly. If we did that,
Yeah,
we wouldn't progress. So
right. We wouldn't grow.
yeah, exactly. Do you have any like tips or tricks that might help somebody slow down or check an assumption, like a little ding that might not be the same for everyone?
I think that one trap is i- getting caught into a thought process of who's right and who's wrong.
Mm,
I call it the paradigm of fault. Trying to
okay.
figure out whose fault something is. It's not helpful.
Yeah.
Um, we need to stay away from that, and we need to instead ask ourselves, we need to get good at recognizing what we're feeling, then recognizing what that means that we might need,
Mm,
and then get good at learning to ask for that need to be met, and ask respectfully instead of demandingly for that
right.
need to be met. So somebody might say something, and my first thought is, well, that was disrespectful. And then I go, ooh, I'm feeling angry.
Yeah.
And under that, I'm feeling afraid of maybe I'm not respected.
Mm,
And so I have a need to know that I matter,
yeah.
and then go from that instead of, you're a very disrespectful person.
Right.
Going into, I don't really understand, what you were getting at. Can you tell me more about that kind of question?
Yeah, and it seems like approaching that situation with the mindset of curiosity
Yeah,
and exploration would also help that other person feel seen and like you really wanted to understand where they're coming from and you're invested in um, understanding them and
yeah.
making it better.
If I'm reacting really strongly to them, they're probably having strong feelings too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's okay. It's okay to have strong feelings.
We're
That's,
human.
yes, it's going to happen.
Yes.
But it's how you react to those and work through those in the context of your relationships that really matter in the long run.
Yeah. We need to be very careful to stay respectful of the other person. As
Yes.
we're back to the boundaries issue again.
Yes, exactly. Um, if a couple were having issues, um, how would pursuing something like family therapy help?
Well, I'm a believer that family therapy can be very helpful, but family therapy, well, let's go back to a couple, because you had said about a couple. So if a couple goes to couples therapy,
Yes, that's the one.
taking they're taking their relationship to therapy.
Okay.
It would be a good idea for both of them to be doing their own therapy as well,
Why?
because the relationship is an entity of its own. There's a you, there's a me, and then there's the us.
Yeah.
And people who protect their coupleship and honor their coupleship and place it really high in their priorities tend to be much more successful in their relationships. If that's what makes it possible to get, well, very curious about what is going on with you? What are you experiencing right now? How can we fix this together versus you're wrecking everything?
Yes. Yeah. I saw it illustrated really nicely one time where somebody drew a Venn diagram. So, it was the two circles interacting, and the overlapping space was the relationship. So
Yep,
each person had their own distinct identities, their own hobbies, their own, they're individual people, but then they overlap for
right.
the partnership or the relationship.
They're
Um,
creating that together.
Yes, and I think sometimes that line gets really blurred if that relationship section starts to take up too much,
Yeah.
and one party or the other kind of loses themselves in that hole without taking time to respect their own individuality and work on their relationship with themselves.
And examine their own experience,
Yeah,
and what they can bring to bear and what they can offer in that
yeah,
coupleship.
yeah, absolutely. Um, let's see. So if somebody was feeling like they were lost in a relationship, or maybe they have a pattern of getting lost in a series of relationships, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Well, ideally, and this isn't always possible, but if it is possible, I think it helps people to take a break
Mm,
and do some of their own intensive therapy and figure out, what am I doing?
yeah,
What's my part in this? Not whose fault is it, but what
right.
is my part in this? What have I within myself that I can offer to help this situation? Also, a lot of times when people do not know their own importance and their own value, they enter into relationships out of a sense of emptiness, and they may consciously or unconsciously want the relationship to fix that.
Yeah.
And relationships can't. And so then they start feeling resentful because they're not getting their expectations met. If we're in a pattern and we're going through repeated disruptions, failures, crises, we need to really step back and look at, well, what's my part in this, and work on personal development, because ultimately a relationship is just a composite of the contributions of the people that are in it.
Yes. And if you don't have your own solid foundation and you're
Right.
not grounded and rooted in yourself, it's going to be really easy to get lost and to stop setting those boundaries, or, to not recognize your own worth and value in that situation, which can lead to some of the issues that we've talked about today.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Anything else that you'd like to add that I didn't ask?
I can't think of anything.
Okay, awesome. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the gender specific programming at Desert Star and who might benefit from that?
The women's program is called Mariposa, and it helps women with a variety of issues, but there's a strong focus on boundaries, and communication, and recognizing self-defeating patterns that have been going on for a while, and what can help that. Um, there's also some exploration about whether or not there's a background, some kind of an addiction going on that
Mm,
needs to be addressed in order to be able to be more effective in dealing with the core issues.
yeah.
Um, the men's program is really not a lot different from that.
Yep.
It's also aimed at looking at what do you bring to the table within your relationships? What kinds of behaviors do you have going on that might be self-defeating and getting in the way? Do you need any help in getting that stuff turned around? And men often talk about having gone through their life without ever having a really close and supportive relationship, any close supportive relationship with other men or
Oh,
men.
wow.
They're very often not particularly close to, or they don't feel particularly supported or validated by their fathers,
Mm,
or they have had problematic relationships kind of across the board in their family.
yeah.
And they're just toughing it out through life, and they don't get a chance to really talk and get support and get to know other men and talk about what it means to be a man in the world. And they get to do that in the men's group.
Yes.
On the other hand, women are more accustomed to speaking with each other and talking about feelings, and they probably, they often benefit a lot from working on communication and assertiveness and boundaries.
Yeah. And what is the benefit of keeping it gender specific, meaning only women in the group and only men in the group?
Well, this isn't universal, but it most commonly, um, men have had a different experience in our culture from what women have had, and the opposite. Women have had a different experience from men, and so they can validate each other's experiences. And the other thing is there isn't any background flirtation going on, or at least there's a lot less.
Yeah, less distractions and
Right,
yes.
right. Less impression management, more
Hmm.
freedom to just say whatever it is that a person needs to say.
Yeah, there's a greater sense of safety in your small tribe.
Right.
Very, very good. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Susie, and having this chat about relationships. It was absolutely wonderful. And I look forward to having you back on the podcast again.
Thank you.
You're
Thanks. I've
welcome.
enjoyed being here.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Desert Star Chats. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a like and a review or sharing with a friend. If you have questions for a further episode, please send them to information@desertstararc.com. If you're interested in learning more about our programs, please visit our website at www.desertstararc.com or give us a call at 520-638-6000. We offer services for adults, meaning 18 plus, residing in the state of Arizona and seeking support for mental health, substance use, unhealthy relationships, and for young adults struggling to transition into adulthood. We are in network with most major insurance companies, and we do offer payment plans. So give us a call, and we are happy to provide a cost estimate for you. We offer services both in person and via telehealth, which means from the comfort of your own home. So there are options for everyone. Again, that number is 520-638-6000, and I hope to catch you for our next episode.